Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college offseason podcast where we're for the fans, by the fans. Earlier this week, the college basketball transfer portal has officially closed. So, with that being said, Matt and I are going to talk about some of the bigger storylines in that transfer portal. Now, just for clarification, the portal is closed. That means that players cannot enter the portal. But does not mean that players can't sign to new schools. You just can't enter the portal past the deadline. So we're going to talk about some of the bigger storylines with that portal officially closing. And first things first, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. I'm going to be completely honest, Matt. I don't know who is eligible, who isn't eligible at this point. So that's the number one question. Who isn't eligible for the portal at this point?
I think we probably are as well. And if it makes you feel any better, Les, I don't think the NCAA or the U.S. government know either, which is both very disconcerting and incredibly interesting. For those of you who are uninitiated with what we're talking about, we, especially over like the last week and a half, a lot of guys, especially a lot of Clemson's basketball roster, Zeke Mayo, a couple of Eddie Lampkin Jr. from Syracuse, all declared their intent to enter the portal. There's only a minor problem with that, though. Some of those guys have played at least 5 years in college basketball, leading some people to question, as that old meme goes, why? 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 You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reasoning behind that is because of you've probably heard about this the House versus NCAA antitrust lawsuit that is allegedly going to be settled any day now and it's been allegedly settled any day now for the past 3.5 months. So what these guys are doing is, depending on what this antitrust lawsuit goes through to say, there is a non-zero chance, but it's not very high, but it's non-zero. I'm talking like a meteorologist here. There's a non-zero chance of a thunderstorm, but it's not like 50%. That the 4-year model of you're in college for 4 years playing athletics and then you're done may end up going by the wayside. And there is an outside chance these guys, who, although I love them, everyone knows I love Zeke Mayo. Way back when he went to Kansas, I was both torn and elated because he was going to get to play on one of the best teams, but also Kansas. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Story for another time. But now these guys may have a chance to get a possible 6 year of eligibility, which means a little bit more NIL money. So people who are very confused by this, even the players are starting to elaborate on it a little more because until this decision goes through, they're trying to maintain a little bit of eligibility, a little bit of that freedom. So let's say, the antitrust lawsuit and the NCAA are forced to give up like that strict, stringent 4 years of eligibility rule. Maybe like Ian Shiflin can go over and play one season at, hell, I don't know, Cal, and make like another $1 million, and that way, you don't have to worry about like your future at that point. So to all the people who are posting like, get ready to learn LinkedIn, buddy, and you need to be in your own enterprise rent-a-car commercial, friend, just keep in mind that there is a strategy here. It's part of the broken system that we've inherited from like years and years of mismanagement and corruption on the part of the NCAA and others. But this is just part of the growing pains, and God only knows what this antitrust lawsuit is going to say because, it's not even the fact these guys have been around for 4 years. I saw, and Les will appreciate this, just yesterday that Devin Askew signed with another school. Starts out of Kentucky, goes to Texas, Cal. Now I think he's somewhere else. It doesn't matter like what your true eligibility is if you keep getting red shirts and your coach leaves and all that stuff. But that's why we have a lot of people here in the portal who've already played 4 or even 5 years. It's because we're still waiting to find out what college athletics is going to look like in a month.
Devin Askew is the prime example of um okay, I want to stop and rewind real quick. It goes without saying you and I are both pro portal.
Yes.
Devin Askew is the prime example of maybe you just ain't got it, bud. Like if you're, I mean, didn't he play for like multiple different high schools as well? And then he goes to
Yeah,
college and he's played like for a different school every year. It's just like,
yeah. Kind of like AJ Store, but without the
yeah,
eyes.
yeah. I'm all for players being allowed to do what Devin Askew has done, but like just from a personal perspective, is there comes a point you just got to do some self-reflection at that point, and just like maybe if I just stick around and put the work in, maybe I can make this situation work. But
Right.
as far as what we're talking about, who isn't eligible at this point, man, the fact that Hunter Dickinson and Chad Baker Mazara might still be eligible, I mean, this point, me and Bean might still be eligible. And I mean, even though I'm one of the few college basketball fans that's like, I really don't care how old these guys are when they play. Like, if it's good basketball, it's good basketball. I compare, college athletics a lot to, my time in college. I'm pro portal, I'm pro transferring as many times as you want because, if I was a student, theoretically, I could have gone to four different schools in 4 different years if I wanted to. Obviously, I didn't. But also, as far as age goes, I mean, you and I both went to IU Southeast. Like, we had students in our class that were older than your stereotypical college age kid. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you can get a waiver from the NCAA to play, I mean, then play. If it's good basketball, it's good basketball. I don't care. I don't get into this whole argument of it's not fair for 18 to 22-year-olds to be playing against a 25-year-old or this, that, and whatever. I grew up in a time where Brandon Weeden was playing for Oklahoma State, where he already had like a minor league baseball career and then comes back and plays quarterback for the Cowboys, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I need to
Or he
rephrase
did
that
play
a
for
little.
the Cowboys too, so
Yeah, you're right. Yes, he did play for the Dallas
man
Cowboys,
had a
but
team.
for this podcast, he played for Oklahoma State. And there's been others like it. I mean, just in my own, just in my own backyard, Quan Cosby had a similar situation. He wasn't a young college kid. He had a minor league stint with the Yankees and then comes back and plays wide receiver for Texas. So I personally, I don't get involved in all that, but like the memes are great, especially like the memes by field. Yes, especially the memes by Field of 68 because like they're posting graphics that like Robbie Hummel and Terrence Oglesby had entered the portal now, and it's just awesome. But no,
Ooh, I would love to see Robbie Hummel try and like play basket. As much as I love the guy, I would love to see him like try to be on Purdue's roster next season.
oh, that'd be
Just
great.
Trey Kaufman Ren, sorry, you're gone. I know you improved a lot, but Robbie Hummel is here.
I don't think Trey Kaufman would lose a starting spot for Robbie Hummel at this point.
I don't know. Maybe Jeff Goodman would pay the money to have him be the starter.
Jeff Goodman got it like that.
He he'd offer Matt Painter like $1 trillion to start him over Trace Kaufman Ren for one game.
If Jeff Goodman got that kind of money, he don't need to be working for Rob Douster anymore.
That's true. We need to start a coalition to like turn Robbie just for one night. Start Robbie Hummel in the Big Ten game.
That would be amazing. I would tune in for that.
They can even be like Iowa or
You
Northwestern.
mean Iowa?
Iowa.
Iowa.
Bennett
Not to
Stokes.
do some foreshadowing, but we might talk about some Iowa
We
guys
probably
later.
will. We probably will. You might.
And anyways, do we have anything more to say about that, or are we moving on?
No, I'm ready. Just to clarify why all these like 4, 5, 6 year players are still hanging out. There's a reason, I promise. Once we figure out what the hell's going on with anything, that's when we'll know. But until
Exactly.
that point, just enjoy the memes.
Just enjoy the memes. Story of our podcast. Just enjoy the memes.
Just enjoy the memes.
I could say something, but that wouldn't be very family
No,
appropriate. So
no, no. We are no longer a family show.
I don't think we ever were. I think you created that whole mantra that we're a family show, but I was just the whole time I'm just like, I mean, we can be, but we're not naturally, I guess.
We can be. We just need to be family friendly now. Jesus loves you all the time.
That if you take anything away from this podcast, is Jesus loves you. That
That's
is for
exactly
sure.
what we should be taking away.
If Jesus is on your team, you don't need anybody else.
Well, Jesus could be on our team because that's how the transfer portal works. We don't
Exactly.
know where anybody is, which leads us to our second topic of discussion for this show. When it comes to the portal in today's day and age, what's more important? Making that big splashy signing that everyone talks about for weeks on end and post horrible decision, young man, underneath excessively, or is it better to move in silence, get together a lot of tiny guys from small schools and see what happens because we're seeing both strategies playing out right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Les to start since I rambled on that first topic. And I wanted his opinion on, is it better to have panache or is it better to be silent G? Les, take it away.
I think it just all depends on what your team needs. But, you know, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of period, you know I'm a very avid Lil Wayne listener. So for this personal segment, me and Matt were talking in the group chat is for the topics for this podcast. And of course, he quoted the famous Lil Wayne line that real G's move in silence like lasagna. And for this particular topic, I'm going to talk about one of the most underrated moves of the portal, in my opinion, and that is Creighton signing former Iowa big man Owen Freeman. And this is a very underrated move for me because at worst, or at the very least, Ryan Kalkbrenner, four-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year, he's entered the draft. So for Owen Freeman to come in, they have another solid big man who's very skilled in the post, especially excels in one-on-one matchups. He can dominate in the post with all the shooting that Creighton's going to have around him. So they have your quote unquote replacement for your all world big man that may be entering the draft. But going back to our first topic, he may have some eligibility left if his NBA stock doesn't pan out the way that he wants it to, and he could come back and now you have depth at the center position. So I think it's like going back to just appreciate the memes. It's like that meme of Professor Hulk. I see this as an absolute win. So
No,
it's an absolute win for Creighton regardless.
that meme haunted me throughout like my junior and senior years of college because everyone thought I looked like Professor Hulk. So they kept making memes of
I
me.
mean no disrespect by this, but I don't know if you have the muscle mass that Professor Hulk has, but I don't think any of us do.
No, no one does. Well, I mean, he's a fictional character, and gamma radiation would, in reality, like strip the skin and bone off our bodies. So
But it's a
I'm
comic
okay
book
with
world,
that.
so we don't have to
It's
abide
true.
by
It's
rules
not
of
a comic.
physics.
We don't have to abide by the laws of physics anymore. But yeah, that meme haunted me. People like made memes of me on like Smart Hulk's body, and it's like I appreciate it, but like that's just so random. I never even thought of that in the movie. But going back to the topic at hand, I mean, it's like you said. The basic unsatisfactory answer is it just depends on your team needs. But you know, there's a way to do it. I mean, you can do what St. John's has done and Creighton have done and fulfill those needs by going out and being like, "Ooh, hey, look who we signed! Look, it's Owen Freeman. Look, it's Josh Dix." And it's like, "Oh, hey, those are pretty important signings." Or you could do like what Indiana's doing, which is signing like a bunch of. It's very obvious that Darian DeVeers and Mike Woodson do not have the same MO when it comes to filling out a roster because now everyone's panicking. There's not a giant 7 foot guy under the rim, but instead of a bunch of 6'5" to 6'8" guards who rebound, which I'm fine with that too. But it's just interesting to see how different teams go about it now because I guess Indiana's flashiest signing is probably Lamar Wilkerson, and that didn't even seem like it was going to be super flashy until it became a battle between IU and UK, ancient rivals trying to reignite their rivalry, I guess, before they play this year. And now then that became a little bit more high profile for a good player. Don't get me wrong, but a little more high profile than I think anybody expected there. So it's interesting to see like the teams that like try to be splashy and the teams that try to like build a little quieter. Because I mean, I even think that like Kentucky and Illinois are doing that too, and I know they've got big recruits. I know UK got Aberdeen, and I know Illinois is in line to get Stojakovic potentially out of Stanford and Cal. But it's interesting what they did before that, which is basically like especially in the case of Illinois, signing a bunch of like foreign guys too, a lot of Eastern European players, and Kentucky's got a couple too. Kentucky, they have made some big moves, but a few weeks ago, I predicted like a splash. Like I thought they were going to steal Brandon Smith from Purdue, and it's not that Aberdeen is like a bad signing at all. I mean, he's from the team that won the national championship. Diabate was on a team that made the Elite Eight. I mean, it's it's not like they're non-important moves, but they're also not like the moves you'd expect Kentucky to make, which is like we're going to steal the best player in the Big East. But the Big East has been like a lot of splash moves to me, especially St. John's and Creighton. I mean, Owen Freeman was really the move that got everybody talking about this year's portal class and that. So the unsatisfactory answer is it just depends. The splash stuff gets the memes, which we're just supposed to enjoy. But there's something about building a team roster, moving in silence, keeping your recruitments like as close to the chest as you can, that gives off a little air of doing it the old-fashioned way. So that's what I think about it. It's like it's a very unsatisfactory, depends on your mood type answer. But there is one thing we do know about the portal, and that's for every great story of a guy moving up to newer and better things on a new roster, there's a dark side, which is some guys who contribute to teams that, overachieved or had great storylines last year are now trying to find new homes. And there are two cases that really stuck out to me because they involve two of our big local market teams last, which was James Scott of U of L and Travis Perry at UK, both entering the transfer portal after the return of Kayshawn Pryor and the many, many guards that Kentucky has signed in the portal as well, which addresses a need last year because, Kentucky's biggest issue was like their guards all got like lamb blasted. And now they have way too many. So Travis Perry in the portal, James Scott in the portal as Louisville's big men who they signed last year are going to join Frew and be healthier. So Les, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a dark side to the portal? And particularly with those two signings, how do you see that playing out in your eyes?
I'm going to be completely honest. I had a take on this that maybe you weren't expecting me to say, but
I'm ready.
um, what I thought of when we were talking about this question is, throughout my years of being a college basketball fan, I always remember the argument about why one and done culture is not good for college basketball. It allows players to not stick around, not properly develop, and it's hard to win with freshmen. Well, now I look at the portal, and as many good things can come out of the portal, it also opens the doors for those guys that do stick around that do stick around for multiple years in college to not be sticking around with the same teams. So now it's hard to get a core group of guys that around together for multiple years and build proper chemistry to, make deep runs in the NCAA tournament. I think the dark side of the portal is that the days of the teams like, 2010 Duke, a team full of guys that were recruited together, played together for 3 to 4 years, and then, their one last hoorah, they go out and win a national championship. And, not to be overly biased here, I mean, you could say the same thing about 2019 Virginia, but I think
Yeah.
those days are about over. Um, it's just gonna be about guys that, are built together in, perfect roster construction and essentially catch lightning in a bottle at the right time, and that's who's going to be the teams winning the national championship. I'm not totally against that, but there is like a certain level of like, fan connection with some of these teams when you have teams from the past that, you watch them from the time they're freshmen to the time they're seniors play for one school. You really get attached to those teams, and those days are just done.
Done.
I think closer to an answer that you maybe were looking for is I was reading a tweet from Nick Roush of KSR, and he said, and he made this statement after Travis Perry entered the portal, is that the days of growing up in Kentucky and shooting around in your, backyard or front yard, I can't remember which he said, doesn't really matter. Shooting around on a basketball rim and dreaming of playing for the University of Kentucky as a local kid are officially over. And I'm gonna be completely honest. I think that tweet was absolutely goofy because um, that those days, as far as Kentucky basketball is concerned, those days are over when
Oh,
John Calipari first got there and they started recruiting five-star one and dones. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a different
no.
era, but that is, I think, the downside of the portal. The biggest downside of the portal for me is basically from a fan perspective of like the days of like getting attached to these teams that have had these multi-year guys all come in as recruits and play for multiple years, and then you go on one last hoorah, their junior or senior year. and win a national title. Those teams and those type of images are long gone.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I think that is part of the adjustment a lot of fans are going to have to make, especially, and this is going to sound weird, in our area, especially, which is so obsessed with college sports. Because, when you say that about Kentucky, that could have easily been a post on an IU message board or in Trilly Donovan's Discord as well. Like, that's all they want is Indiana kids. Like when they first hired Darian DeViers, it was like, I want this guy from Christmas Addicts. I want this guy from Jeff. We're going to keep Trent Sisley. We're going to get this guy, this guy, and this guy. And they did keep Trent Sisley, but I don't think any of those guys from Jeff for Christmas Addicts are going to be able to compete with those dudes they brought in from Drexel and Elon. So I'm going to stay. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that is something that people are going to have to get adjusted to. It's like you said with 2019 Virginia. Part of the storyline with that team was the redemption of these guys who got blasted by UMBC the year prior. Kyle Guys coming back for one last hurrah with the guys, and they did it. And it was like, oh my God, they did it. Or, Villanova before that.
Hmm.
We all, I mean, they're still together because reasons, but we all were talking about Chris Jenkins and Brunson and uh, fudge. I'm gonna mix him up with the other guy because I always get Ryan D'Archino and Dante
Ryan
DiVincenzo
Archie Nakano.
and DiVincenzo mixed up, and they're all together still. But that was fun because you could tell they had a brotherhood thing going. And it's not like the last couple. It's not like Florida this year was like watching a super team come together. Let's
Hmm.
not like lose that in the sauce. These were one, I think, 0 star guys, and then you've got Elijah Martin who made his bones at FAU, and then Dusty May leaves, and he's got a shot now. So it's not like this was a superstar team coddled together with money and dreams. They did have some camaraderie, and that's part of what you have to do when you're in the middle of the season is build it up. But there is going to be like a weird feeling, like watching a team constantly switch its roster out. There's no attachment to any of the players. You're not like, well, I remember when this guy was like a freshman and he couldn't play, or he was playing 5 minutes a game, getting like destroyed by some big man, and now look at him. He's a defensive player of the year. Because by the time he gets to that point, he'll have been at 3 different schools. I'm not complaining about that, but that's just the exchange you have to take. So I mean that is going to be a big adjustment, especially for a lot of the fan bases in like areas where college basketball has like a special place in the culture. Like around here, especially like Kentucky, like U of L, like Indiana, like well, Purdue still gets in-state guys for the most part, but even they've brought in not as many, but they've brought in a lot of additions from the portal too. So
Hmm.
it's going to be adjustments for people. In fact, for the first time ever, this one I knew things were probably going in that direction. And I'll try to wrap this up quickly. Is that I looked at a Purdue message board once just to see like what their recruiting was, how their recruiting of another player Indiana was interested in was going, and there were people like vouching on this message board not to sign a kid from Brownstown, Indiana, named Jack Benter, because they didn't want to waste that roster spot on a development player. They wanted to go out and they wanted to get a big immediately. And it's like, in this day and age, that's solid strategy.
It's a valid argument, yeah.
With the portal, I mean, if you don't win right off the bat and address your weaknesses, that seat gets a lot hotter, a lot faster, and those fans get a lot more angry a lot quicker. So yeah, I think that's one of the big adjustments we're going to have to make to this because and it's not as dramatic as like, oh, you'll never play for Kentucky if if unless you're like a transfer portal 5 star guy, because you never know. This guy, Travis Perry could go like to. I'm gonna throw a school out there that I've seen him associated with South Carolina, tear it up, and he marfos back to Kentucky after a while. It's not like a big deal. So
Or I got another example for you.
go
Or
ahead.
because if you remember, not to switch sports, but going to college football, when Quinn Ewers was coming out of the high school ranks, he commits to Ohio State initially, kind of lets the Sark era kind of build its culture a little bit, sits a year, learns a Ryan Day system, develops for a little bit, and then transfers back to Texas and then becomes a starting quarterback. So from my understanding, from everything I've heard from the Texas beat writers, his plan was always to come back to Texas, but he just wanted to um, first of all, he wanted to commit to college because he had an NIL deal waiting on him for over $1 million, and if he was still playing high school football, he could not accept the money.
Yeah,
But anyway, but yes, part of it also was so that he could develop, at the college level and then come back to Texas when the time was right, which is
right.
essentially what happened. And regardless of what anyone says, Quinn Ewers had a very good career for Texas. And it's kind of amazing to me that he hasn't been drafted yet, but that's another story. It's also amazing Shadeur Sanders hasn't been drafted, but that's another story.
Well, with Quinn Ewers, they're probably scared of all those ibexes he shot or something that were hanging out behind him at his house. Apparently, he's a big game hunter or something.
Yeah, yeah, he's a
That
big
was
hunter. He's a
very
big
impressive.
outdoorsman, yeah.
That was very impressive to see all those ibexes and mountain goats and springbok and other gazelles behind. Yes, I'm an animal nerd too. Deal with it, America. Um,
I think we knew that. Anybody who listens to the podcast knew that.
that's
Dude,
probably
our podcast setup was referred to as the bedroom of nerds for the longest time.
it's true. It's true. But with all that being said, and with a guy like Travis Perry, especially, it could be you just need to get away. You were kind of forced to play last year, and you dealt with the brunt of being a freshman backup from like Lyon County, Kentucky, in the SEC, which is you're going to get rough. So maybe it's better, especially for your mental state. You go into like another school for a while. There's not as much pressure on you there theoretically as there would be playing for their hometown team, and you just kind of let it happen. You just kind of grow as a player, grow as like a person, and you come back later on.
I
James
think,
Scott's a little different though and this
yeah.
is how because he's a little bit older, and because we always have to talk about him when we talk about college basketball. I have no doubt that that man is going to play for Will Wade and the North Carolina State Wolfpack
And he'll
next
probably
season,
tear it up. He'll tear it up for Will Wade.
and he will. Which brings us to one of our other favorite things to talk about, which is all the things we've talked about: the dark side, the eligibility, moving in silence. It all comes down to one thing: do you win the portal? And if so, who's won the portal the best, or who's had the most wins in the portal in your estimation? Let's hear it.
So I'm actually going to go with St. John's here as who
Okay.
my opinion has won the portal. And the reason why I say St. John's is, man, I'm imagining a Patino press that stereotypically forces a lot of turnovers. And now you have a point guard who can push the tempo on the fast break. And you surround that point guard with a lot of athletes around him, like a Dylan Mitchell. And dare I say, with the ceiling I can potentially see with this St. John's transfer portal class, dare I say I can see a ceiling of the 2009 North Carolina Tar Heels.
Oh my God. Whoa. We're talking near blasphemous levels here, Les.
I'm
I'm
just saying, and it's funny because it all starts with a former North Carolina guard.
Yep, that's true.
Ian Jack, and it's funny because Ian Jackson, I did say when he was recruited to North Carolina that if he could stick around for a couple years, I thought he could have a very similar career to the point guard on the 2009 North Carolina Tar Heels, Ty Lawson. So it all comes full circle here.
America's favorite Denver Nugget. Sorry, I had to get that one in there. Yeah, it's really intriguing too when you talk about St. John's, a team that for the most part underachieved last year, would underachieve in many eyes of many in the NCAA tournament, and then loses their conference player of the year. And it's like I actually think they got better. There's no
Hmm.
there's no doubt in my mind that they got better. And it's like, well, this is the portal, I guess. Addition by subtraction by addition by subtraction. So I would agree that St. John's is definitely one of the winners. But I'm going to go with my favorite thing to do, which is making generic, vague statements that everyone loves, which is I'm going to say the winner of the transfer portal is the mid 10.
The
And
mid 10.
what do I
Ooh.
mean by that? I am not talking about Michigan or Michigan State or anybody like that. I'm talking about those teams that kind of finished middle of the pack in the Big Ten. IU, Iowa, Illinois, even though Illinois was a little bit more up there than you think. Those teams have had very nice off seasons. And I mean, there's new coaches involved with two of those, so you don't know how that's going to work. But I mean, Iowa, you basically got all of Drake's roster, which did manage to beat Missouri and put a scare into Texas Tech last season. You've got Bennett Shirts, you've got everyone that comes with him, and you've got Ben McCollum trying to bring a Virginia-esque defense into the Big Ten. You've got IU, who massively underperformed in every way, shape, and form last season. Now, instead of going with a constant barrage of big men and no shooting, they've got all shooters, and they're trying to recruit maybe a couple bigs just to round out the roster. A lot of rebounding guards, still waiting on one of their 6-year guys in Luke Goody getting that potential waiver to play again. If so, there's another shooter for you. They're aiming to revitalize their offense. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Illinois is one of those teams that's quietly, very quietly having a very nice portal with a lot of the guys they've been getting. They got Ivisic to go with his brother from Arkansas. They're probably the front runner at this moment to get Andrei Stojakovic. And they're also in the process of going after a couple other Eastern European guys. They've got a lot of bitches on the roster, and that's a good thing because I think that they're going to have a very dynamic, fluid offense next season.
Speaking before you continue, I have the perfect nickname for Illinois if all these transfers happen.
What?
Big Ten Barcelona instead of FC Barcelona.
BT Barcelona.
BT Barcelona.
I like it. I like that. Because, I mean, that's what they're aiming for, and, man, I'm impressed with it. So, like, those mid-tier Big Ten teams kind of underperformed in the tournament or didn't make the tournament, had a lot of questions last year. They're all having pretty good portals right now, and I think the Big Ten, it's fine the fact Michigan State's taking some hits. Michigan, if Yaxel Landenborg doesn't get drafted, watch out for them, too, even though they were on the top of the conference last year. The Big Ten is going to be one hell of a conference next season. And once the rosters actually shape up, it's going to be interesting to see who has those little edges that matter the most. And so, with about 6 minutes remaining in the podcast, it's time to ask the opposite end of that question, which is kind of twofold, but can you really lose in the transfer portal? There are arguments for yes and no. And if you can, who is the biggest loser in the transfer portal? We're gonna use our calls like SpongeBob, loser. So and find out who is losing in the portal. So Les, who's your biggest loser?
I'm going to get through this segment quick because I want to talk about, because we're going to save the last segment for just talking about our teams and what they've done through the portal. So that's one I want to spend a little more time on for reasons. But anyways, I'm going to say that the ways you can lose the portal, I think, are two ways. If everyone leaves and you have to scramble to assemble a roster last minute, I think that's a way to lose the portal because you don't really have the time to properly, evaluate the players that you're bringing in. You just kind of gotta fill in for necessity. And I think Baylor fits that mold perfectly. Because they've lost pretty much everybody from last year's team, and now they're kind of scrambling to just fill the roster spot at this point. And they brought in a couple guys already, but it's a lot of scrambling and a lot of last minute pieces. And the other way you can lose the portal is if you overdo it, to where you just you spend a bunch of money and you bring in so many different people that you could potentially put yourself in a situation where where other kids are unhappy and it creates chemistry issues. And I think we could potentially see that with Kentucky. I see Kentucky's transfer portal class either going really good or really bad and no in between.
I could honestly see that too. Mine is going to be more of a brief thing here too, because when I see like a lot of losers of the transfer portal, I see Arizona listed on there all the time. And I go and I look at Arizona's roster, and they kept everybody, and they have a bunch of really nice high school recruits coming in, and they're only losing in the portal because they didn't bring anybody in from the portal in the eyes of these people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, just because you're doing it the old-fashioned way, if you're Arizona, doesn't mean you're doing it incorrectly,
Yeah.
Well, anyone putting Arizona on their loser list, why? Again, why? They're fine. They're just doing it the old-fashioned way. And I know it's fun to talk about the portal and the NIL money, but when you're doing it the old-fashioned way, you're doing it the oldfashioned way. Tommy Lloyd knows what he's doing. Let the man cook in peace.
Let the man cook in peace. And that's all I have to say about that.
So, Les, I turn the floor over to you for the last 3.5-ish minutes. Tell me about what Texas and Duke have done that is so damn impressive that they're going to win 99 games or something.
Perfect seasons for both of them, even though that's not possible.
Two
But
undefeated teams meeting in the national championship.
that would be historic right there. But I think the most impressive is how good of an offseason both of my teams have had, and they've done it in polar opposite ways. You look at Duke, as we talk about the transfer portal and adding all these new pieces, sometimes the biggest win from the transfer portal is not losing anybody to the portal. The only Duke player that entered the portal was a guy that barely played, and that's Stanley Borden. But you look at all the guys that are expected to come back because Mason Gillis and Sion James are out of eligibility. We knew Cooper Flagg was going to go pro. Regardless of whatever the talking point was this entire college basketball season, we all knew Cooper Flagg was going pro. And of course, Con Knipple and Tyrese Proctor also go pro. But when you get the likes of Slim Evans to come back, when you get the likes of Darren Harris coming back. Darren Harris, that is a name a lot of you all got to watch for next year because Darren Harris is a recruit that before Con Knipple got on campus and we saw the work ethic that he was putting in and how much more developed he was as a player than what a lot of us expected. Darren Harris was a player I watched in the Chipotle Nationals be the second best player in that tournament. And who was first, you might ask? Cooper Flagg himself. So Darren Harris is an absolute bucket and an absolute sniper, and that's a name that college basketball fans are going to know very quick next year. But also Patrick Ngamba comes back. That he could be the low. Yes, he could be the low post present that this Duke team was missing this past year. And that could be just through another year of development. But also, Malik Brown is coming back, one of the best defenders in college basketball. Not to mention, Duke is talking about adding a couple pieces to the portal, but sometimes the best addition from the portal is not losing anybody to the portal. And of course, Texas, under the new Sean Miller regime, they've added a completely new roster. And yeah, polar opposite to what Duke has done. But the guys that they've added are all pretty good players. I mean, you have Simeon Wilcher from St. John's. You have, Modis, I'm going to butcher this last name, but Modis Vokatiasis from FAU, Cam Heide from Purdue, and Dylan Swain. And, they're in the run for several other, key players. So, Sean Miller, I was very hesitant about the Sean Miller hire. But he's assembled a very good roster in his own right. And we got about a minute left, so I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way before Matt finishes up his talking points. As always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel to get the latest updates we have of content coming soon. Be sure to follow the social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. Be sure to follow the side quest on TikTok. That's at BeansDad018. Matt, round us out. What we got?
Well, I know you weren't fond of Sean Miller when you referred to him as a regime. Like
Mm-hmm.
the dictator of Austin, Texas is coming, baby. And he likes Cincinnati chili or something. But aside from that, I agree with you fully. And I mean, Indiana fans, for the last 15 seconds, for the love of God, stop freaking out that there's not like 2 7-foot guys on the roster. All you did was bitch about that last year. Stop it.
All guards from all bigs.
Stop it. Just enjoy the ride, people. Enjoy the memes.